Chapter 3 of Betty Baird's Ventures by Anna Hamlin Weichel. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Holly Jensen. Chapter 3, Merrylegs. The next morning, Betty was up bright and early to have a plunge with her father before he went to the city. The tide was high about 6 o'clock, and after swimming and floating half an hour, they sat down with Mrs. Baird to a breakfast with strawberries from their own garden and cream from their own cow, items that added spice and contentment to a meal that even otherwise would have been abundantly satisfactory. "This is a very attractive table," said Dr. Baird, leaning over to smell the clove pinks Betty had put in the center. He added, smiling, "It reconciles one to these commuters' early breakfasts." Betty drove her father to the station, about 2 miles distant, stopping in the village on her way back to do the day's marketing. The long street was filled with handsome equipages. Betty had met no one in Hobart except the librarian, Miss Hunt, and of course the Ellsworths, who were neighbors. Consequently, she was new to the inquisitive little village, and more than one person, looking after her, was impelled to ask who she was. Her plain white linen dress with a dainty flowing tie, and the white college hat of felt from which a red quill inclined saucily, were very smart and becoming. The lithe, athletic figure, almost boyish in its freedom from fuss and feathers, yet round and girlish, showed in every movement and buoyant step her keen zest in the happy summer life around her. Betty filled her cart with parcels. Then, after unhitching sturdy Merrylegs and patting him for a moment, she placed one foot on the step and was about to get into the cart when an automobile puffed by, honking warningly. Merrylegs shied violently at the sound, and Betty was thrown over on the seat, while the tiny animal ran for dear life. At first, Betty could do nothing but hold on, to keep from being thrown out. The frightened steed ran some distance, but was finally brought to a standstill by a powerfully built young man, who sprang out from the sidewalk and literally took the charming little animal into his arms as he would a football antagonist. Betty hastily regained the seat and reached out for the reins. With a low bow and a merry twinkle in a pair of candid blue eyes that shone from his tanned face like brilliant and kindly turquoise, the handsome youth handed them to her. "Oh, thank you," said Betty, adjusting her hat and straightening the lines. "I hope you were not mortally injured by my vicious steed." Her dark eyes smiled mischievously when she noted the 6 feet 2 inches and the broad shoulders of her rescuer. She could not help laughing. It was funny to see that big boy and her mite of a pony. Keeping his muscular hand on the frisky animal so that Betty could not drive off, while a daring light came into his preternaturally grave countenance, he said, "Do you think it's quite safe for you to drive alone?" "I shall run the fearful risk," answered Betty, sober as a judge. "I think I shall follow you in my car, for your steed is evidently very fiery." "Pray do not give yourself any anxiety," answered Betty, without a smile, though her eyes laughed. "If you would be so kind, I should like your name, so I can propose you as a candidate for a life-saving medal." "Thank you, but I prefer to remain a hero in humble life," the young man answered with equal gravity. "You are too modest," urged Betty politely. "It was only a situation I saved, not a life. In a second your hat would have been in the road. I am under deep obligations. I could face death, but not ridicule. Thank you again." Betty flicked Merrylegs with the lines, and he trotted sedately down the street. All the way home Betty laughed over the episode. "Oh, Mother!" she cried, and she leaped out of the cart and ran into the flower garden. "The funniest thing I ever saw happened this very morning in the village." "Stop laughing, Betty, and tell me about it," said her mother, yet yielding to the contagion of her laughter. Betty rapidly recounted every detail of her adventure. "I am afraid you did not thank the boy properly," said Mrs. Baird. Why, Mother, how could I look on him except as a melodramatic hero when he literally towered over poor little Merrylegs? For a moment I thought he would just pick him up and spank him. Merrylegs was gritty, though. I should like to know him, said her mother. One should be grateful for a kindness, even if it is not performed at the risk of one's neck. Betty, glancing up at her, felt that it would be wise to hurry away, for when her mother's mouth had that little pucker, it meant that she was not wholly satisfied with her daughter. "Well, I think I'll go upstairs," she said. "Sit down, Betty," said her mother, looking at her with troubled eyes. "Now, Carissima, what have I done?" asked Betty cajolingly, smoothing her mother's hair caressingly. "Don't you think, Betty, that you were somewhat easy in your conversation with that strange lad?" asked Mrs. Baird. Betty's cheeks flamed. She shook her head negatively and stood up. Her mother put out a detaining hand. "I think that a few simple words of gratitude would have been better." "I didn't have any gratitude," said Betty impatiently. "It was all a humbug," and she ran up to her room and slammed the door in a way that was not to be mistaken. She threw herself on the bed and cried luxuriously. The runaway had been more than the funny scene she had thought it, and the excitement had upset her. The world grew very dark and unjust to poor Betty. "Mother always said I should not be self-conscious with boys, but treat them as I did girls. And now she is scolding me because I did that very thing. If it had been a girl, we would have laughed together over the ridiculousness of it all, and I should have invited her to come home with me in my cart." Betty did not find her argument wholly convincing. She knew that the fun of the situation had appealed to her so strongly that she could not resist prolonging it. Yes, she had missed the merrymaking of the Pines, and this was the first opportunity she had had to give and take since coming home. With a blush, she owned that she had acted more like a girl of 14 than one who had passed through the dignifying process of graduating. She sat up on the edge of the bed, very red and very cross. "Well, it's horrid," she decided. She didn't know with whom to be crossest, whether with the guiltless lad, the pony, or perhaps with Betty Baird. "Yes, it's horrid to be grown up," she repeated aloud. She bathed her face and rubbed it so vigorously that she came out of the process as red as a rose. "Oh, Mother, please forgive me," she cried contritely, running to where Mrs. Baird still sat. "I am so unhappy I don't know what to do. I hate to be grown up. I hate scolding. I hate with an awful hatred that horrid boy. But I do love you." It is hard to know when we are grown up. Everything else came to you easily and naturally. I hoped that would too. Well, it doesn't. There is nothing I hate as much as young ladyfiedness. You are upset by the excitement of the morning. You must not worry any more about it. Don't think how you act, Betty. I was impudent to you and it hurts me." Her mother put her hand over Betty's mouth. "Now let us walk," she proposed. "Come, that's a good thing," cried Betty, quoting from her Alice in Wonderland and dragging her mother up. "Good! This is a vain and unprofitable conversation on such a morning," and laughing, she skipped her mother down to the gate, swinging her hand back and forth. Mrs. Baird begged off. "I am all out of breath, Betty." "It's good for you. I am getting even too," said Betty gaily, and like two happy schoolgirls, they walked arm in arm up and down the shore. End of chapter 3. Recording by Holly Jensen.